Hello and welcome everybody to our conversation tonight. I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Stephanie Springate to welcome us to McMaster.
Hello everyone, my name is Stephanie Springate and I'm the director of the School of the Arts at McMaster University, and I want to welcome you to Let's Talk About It, Transformative Justice During the Apocalypse. I have two laptops running. The School of the Arts aims to critically reflect on and confront historical and ongoing legacies of settler colonialism and transatlantic slavery. And we are committed to centering disability justice in the work that we're doing in the university, in our classrooms, and in our programming. And it is with that we are so grateful for this panel tonight. I want to send out a bunch of affirmations and thank yous. I learned today in Syrus's class the concept of just these affirmations, and I really love that term, Syrus. So I want to thank our instructional assistants and our tech crew, Grace Pender, Anna Skirtik, Gordon Simmons, and James Kendall. I also have absolute deep appreciation for those that are helping with ASL and CART interpretation tonight, Ayoka, Christopher, and Stanley. I also want to express deep gratitude to my colleague, Syrus Ware, who has brought this panel to our speaker series in the School of the Arts this year, and also to our funders, the Mavis and Wally Pazonka Fund. I encourage everyone to follow us on Instagram. We are SOTA McMaster, so that's SOTA McMaster, and also follow us on Facebook, which is under the Faculty of Humanities at McMaster, for future speaker series that will actually center and continue the work that we're starting here tonight on disability justice. So thank you. I want to thank all of the panelists and for everybody for coming tonight, whether you're in our Zoom room or whether you're on live YouTube. Enjoy, thank you, and all the best.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. I'm going to hand it to Leah and Ejeris to welcome us to the event tonight, and then we'll get to our land acknowledgement.
Hi, sorry, this isn't in the lineup, so I was like, oh, we talk now. Hi, all 1,500 people or something who have signed up to see us. My name is Leah. I'm a mixed race, light brown skinned femme with purple curly hair and glasses. Yeah, just so happy to be here as one of the two co-editors of the book. We have an amazing lineup for y'all. Just want to say that. Ejeris?
Hi, all. I'm so grateful for everyone who is attending and everyone who's speaking, and for all of your TJ practice that you've already done and that you'll continue to do. My name's Ejeris Dixon. I'm one of the co-editors of this book / project / catalyst for your TJ work. I have a dark brown fro, gray big glasses. I'm brown skin, and I have a bossy face, and that is me.
Thank you both. This is Syrus speaking. I have long blonde dreadlocks. They're about 3 feet long, 4 feet long, clear glasses, and I'm wearing a neon yellow shirt. And I just want to say again, yes, hello to everyone who's joined us in the room, and hello to everyone who's joined us on YouTube. This was such a great, just so great to get the response for people wanting to have this conversation. I'm actually coming to you from Toronto, from the part of Toronto that was underwater at the time of the Toronto Purchase. This is therefore the unceded territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit. This area is under contestation. This is an area that is contested. This area is covered by the Just with One Spoon Wampum. This area is covered by Treaty 13, and this is Three Fires territory. McMaster is also located in the area covered by the Just with One Spoon Wampum. We recognize that conversations about transformative justice need to necessarily center things like land back and the movement for Indigenous resurgence. Transformative justice grows out in large part of Indigenous communities and Indigenous knowledge, and we recognize that there will be no justice for any of us on this stolen and occupied territory. So we are saying thank you for the chance to gather in this place, and we will keep fighting until we are all free. We have a lot of access opportunities today for us to practice together as part of our ongoing TJ work. We have ASL interpretation. So if you need to double pin the interpreter, if you're here in the Zoom room, you can double pin Ayoka or Christopher. Their names are listed as interpreter on their screen names. For folks who are watching on the YouTube, you should be able to see them in a pop-up bubble. We have cart services available here that Stanley is providing. And again, you can choose the closed captioning button to be able to see that. Everyone on YouTube, you should be seeing this right now. There is tech support in the chat. So if you do need help, you can send a message in the chat, and we will be here to help you as you need it to go through. Now, tonight's conversation is going to be talking about transformative justice. We're going to be talking about abolition. We're going to be talking about healing. We're going to be talking about harm. We're going to be talking about a lot of very complex issues. We know that these conversations can sometimes be triggering for those of us who have had experiences of harm or violence or other experiences in our lives. So this is sort of a general trigger warning for a discussion of violence and harm that is going to be part of our work necessarily as we unpack how we're doing transformative justice in our communities. We have an incredible group of folks, an incredible lineup for you tonight. First of all, we're going to be hearing from the co-editors, Ejeris, Dixon, and Leah Lakshmi Piepzna-Samarasinha. Ejeris Dixon is an organizer, consultant, and political strategist with 20 years of experience organizing within racial justice, LGBTQ, transformative justice, anti-violence, and economic justice movements. She is the founding director of Vision Change Win Consulting, where she partners with organizations to build their capacity and deepen the impact of their organizing strategies. Her essay, Building Community Safety, Practical Steps Towards Liberatory Transformation, is featured in the anthology, Who Do You Serve? Who Do You Protect? Police Violence and Resistance in the United States. Welcome, Ejeris. We'll also be hearing from Leah Lakshmi Piepzna-Samarasinha, the other co-editor, who is a queer, disabled, non-binary femme writer, disability and transformative justice movement worker, an educator of Burgher, Tamil, Sri Lankan, and Irish Roma ascent. The Lambda Literary Award winning author of Tonguebreaker, Bridge of Flowers, Care Work, Dirty River, Love Cake, and Consensual Genocide, and the co-editor of The Revolution Starts at Home, Confronting Intimate Violence in Activist Communities. Leah, since 2009, has been a lead artist with the Disability Justice Performance Collective, Sins Invalid. Welcome, Leah. We'll also be hearing from panelists, Monica Forrester, Chanelle Gallant, Elene Lam, and Terri Monture. I'm just going to introduce them now, and then we'll get into our discussion. Monica Forrester is a two-spirit trans queer woman of color, working and advocating for the decriminalization of sex work, currently program manager of Maggies Toronto Sex Work Action Project and founder of Trans Pride Toronto. Monica is working to bring inclusion, equality, and awareness of trans and non-binary issues. Chanelle Gallant is a transformative organizer, writer, a trainer with a focus on sex and justice. She is a member of the National Leadership Team for Showing Up for Racial Justice, or SURJ, and is co-founder of the Migrant Sex Workers Project and the first SURJ chapter in Canada. Chanelle has published and presented widely on sex and/or social and economic justice. She is working on her first book, A Theory of Sexual Labor. Welcome, Chanelle. Elene Lam. Elene Lam holds a Master of Law in Human Rights, a Bachelor of Law, a Master of Social Work, and a Bachelor of Social Work. She is founder and executive director of Butterfly, Asian and Migrant Sex Workers Support Network, and co-founder of Migrant Sex Workers Project. She has been involved in sex work, gender, migrant, labor movements for over 20 years. Elene has provided trainings for community members, service providers, and policymakers on sex work, migration, anti-oppression practice, and human rights in different countries. She also participated in the meeting of the Committee of the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women of the United States in Geneva to advocate for the rights and safety of migrant sex workers. And Terri Monture. Terri Monture is of the Kenyan Kehaka Mohawk Wolf Clan from Six Nations of the Grand River Territory in Southern Ontario. She works in the labor movement as a staff representative of the Canadian Media Guild, representing media workers from a variety of organizations, including the CBC. Her passion is worker and Indigenous rights, and spends far too much time thinking about resistance movements and decolonization, anti-capitalist, and anti-oppression activities. Terri is a member of No More Silence and Indigenous land defense across borders, helping to organize communities' resistance to oppressive activities in urban settings and at Six Nations. So welcome to our incredible group of speakers tonight. I can't wait to hear from all of you. We wanted to start off the evening with a bit of a cozy fireside chat with Leah and Ejeris, where we can hear a little bit more about this incredible book, its inception, and what has happened in this year of all years. Could you have ever imagined you'd be launching this book into a world that was about to go into both a pandemic, in the middle of a pandemic, and then of course the revolution? I mean, who would have thought? TJ is on everyone's lips right now. This is so exciting to have this book in this world at this moment. So Leah and Ejeris, I'm going to turn to you. And we'll have a little bit of I just want to ask you some questions about the book. First of all, what I'd love to ask each of you is, what was the initial purpose of this book when you conceived it? And has there been a different or changing need for this book over this past year?
Totally. This is Leah. We back channeled. I'm going to start and then Ejeris is going to pick up. There's been some changes. Where this book started was, as was in my bio, I, with Chinyi Chen and Jay Dulani, CHING-C-IN-CHEN, and then JAIDULANI. I'm gonna wait for the car to catch up. I was part of a 3-person group that co-edited a book called The Revolution Starts at Home a really long time ago now. It started as a zine, it became a book, and basically we started in 2004. Hi, I'm from Toronto. I was working at the tenant hotline and stealing their fucking high-speed Wi-Fi to make this work. And it was just 3 of us being like, we're all survivors of domestic violence and sexual assaults. And we want to create a zine or a book where there's some real talk conversations about how do you create safety without the cops, like the good, the bad, the ugly, and the mix. And that book came out in 2008, I think, 2009. And a couple of years ago, it went out of print, came back into print, and then people were coming up to me. I was getting emails from people saying, "Oh my God, so grateful for this book." And I was like, it's still the only book out there. There's other things, there's websites, there's Tumblrs, there's zines. But if you want to just go to the library and pick up something that's like, how do I create some sort of safety plan, some kind of way of creating more safety and justice for myself or my community without the cops, it's the only book, and it's out of date. And I would, when people would hit me up and be like, can you suggest some resources? I have this situation in my community. I wouldn't point to it. I'd be like, well, there's, this blog post and this website and this and that. So when we started thinking about it, I know a lot of us, we were like, we want to have something else that's like a cookbook where you can pick up, here's all these different ways to do work of creating safety that doesn't rely on police and prisons, and to really document that we've been doing this work. We've been doing this work for decades and also generations, especially because as abolition and TJ have become more popular subjects, some of the stuff that inspired me when I was getting started, it's on MySpace. You can't find it anymore, and I know that we both talked about having people come to us and being like, well, I want to do this work, but there's no role models. And us both being like, no, there's been so many projects. There's been so many different ways people have done this work and put their blood, sweat, and tears into, but it's not always easy to find if you weren't there for that moment. So we really just wanted to create a place where people could get into the how of transformative justice, not just the why, because I know we also were really, we shared a lot about how we were hearing people say, I get abolition, I get that prisons are bad, I get the cops are bad, but tell me specifically, what do we do instead? And don't just tell me, well, you don't dispose of people and love is enough. Really tell me, what do I do when I hear screaming on my street? Or what do I do when someone's been murdered? Or what do I do, in my community when there's X, Y, or Z thing happening? And we wanted to create something that wouldn't be every project that's out there, because you can't do that in one book, but that would create a place where some of those projects could be documented and where people who were searching for, I've been abusive, what do I do? Hi, here's this article. I want to create, mental health support services that don't rely on 911. Great, there's a couple people already doing that. Here's some things. So that's some of what I remember of what our goals were. Ejeris, do you want to take it up from there? And it's just, yeah.
Sure. So I feel like one of the things about me is that, right, organizing and movement building like both raised and saved me. And so my dream of this book is that this book is accompanying people in their TJ work. This book is accompanying people in their hard conversations and community meetings and relationship building. So the goal of the book is to show so many ways to do TJ, some that will feel really easy and you realize you've already been doing this, and some that may take time to learn and build, but there's a blueprint. And a friend of mine said that, when people could still gather in person, that she was carrying 2 copies of the book around, right? And or she had 1 copy to like read and 1 copy to like where there are pages marked when it was useful in either the workshop or meeting that she was in. So how can the part of the story is, and I think we say this in the book, right? Like Leah asked me, I think about 3 times to co-edit this book. And I was like, I'm an organizer, I'm a strategist, I'm not a writer. I don't know what I would do this, and this medium intimidates me. And, but I think there's a piece around many people's experience of TJ is that we did it because we had to survive. And there's a bit of isolation in that. And so there aren't enough people to do all the trainings or all of this, but like, how does a book accompany a movement as it grows, right? And I think what's really happened in the last year is there's been an advance in the conversation around abolition and TJ that is connected to the devastation of the pandemic. It's connected to all the ways that people have had to figure out how to take care of themselves in the face of many governmental failures, and of people being really fed up by the by the state violence that's happening to Black communities, to Black trans communities, to queer communities, to disabled folks, to sex workers, to immigrants, to so many of us and so many, to poor people, to marginalized communities. So we wanted a how. While I love theory around me, it's always, I need to see the thing or feel the thing to understand it. And so it has parts that are real how-to and bullet points for folks. And then we have narratives of people's processes. And then we also have essays that are just about our questions. So what it's felt like is that there are just different aspects of the book that have really resonated and been needed. And what, yeah, that's all. I could talk forever. Let me rein it in.
Amazing. This has given me, it's just so fruitful, right? And it makes, I mean, I hope that it's making me want to read the book again. You know, I'm like, oh yeah, I want to read, you know, just to be able to delve into it, because there are these beautiful, the praxis, the how-to is so embedded in every page. I'm curious about transformative justice more broadly in this moment that we find ourselves in. I'm wondering how you're seeing transformative justice practices intersecting with organizing and movement building. I mean, Ejeris, you mentioned being a strategist, being on the ground, you know, but in general, for both of you, how are you seeing this intersecting with movement building in this moment?
I'll jump in quickly, but I think it's both that a lot of us have had experiences of political spaces that have been harmful and violent, that undermine the political work that we're doing and the ways that we need each other. And we start to create distrust within our movements. And so I think there's one piece around how does TJ makes our movements more safe and more honest, right? Recognizing that the state is violent and sometimes we're violent towards each other, and having liberatory practices on how we create safety is necessary. And then there's also like TJ as a movement, right? We believe in abolition, and we also know that harm and violence will continue to happen, and that we need to build all kinds of ways to be safe with each other, from people we know to strangers, right? We need some, you know, like if two people are fighting outside, if we have friends in abusive relationships. So I think it's the both and that TJ can be a part of movement building organizations to make them healthier. And TJ is a huge part of how we create abolition, particularly for all of us who have experienced harm and violence in our lives, so that we are centered in our movements. And yeah, kicking it to Leah.
Yeah. Well, Toronto is one of my homes, but I've been living in Seattle, Duwamish Territories, DUWAMISH, for 5 years. And I don't know, I am a movement person, but I am a disabled movement person who has pretty much been in my house. And no, I'm not alone in this at all on this call for the past year. So I feel like I don't have the same grounds. I feel like sometimes I don't have the same right on the ground perspective that Ejeris has, but I can share some things that I've observed, which are that, you know, living in the States this year, with the uprisings and the rebellions, I mean, we had more mass resistance going on in, you know, certain ways than we've had in years in terms of every single city, right? And living in Seattle, you know, we had protests that took over an entire section of the city for months, including a police precinct. People took the police precinct over, and people took over the park and built housing. And it was complicated. And, you know, that's just one facet of so many different forms of organizing that were happening. And there's a million other examples in every city, rural area, you know, like there's so many different ways that people were like, okay, the time is now, you know, we're practicing what we preach. And what I saw happening was kind of the gauntlet being thrown down of, you know, as Ejeris has said, as Syrus has said, like, this is a year where abolition has been on everybody's lips in a different way. Like, you know, in a way that continues to surprise me. Like, I would never have really expected to open the New York Times on my computer and see this op-ed that's, you know, by Miriam Kaba that says, yes, we really mean defunding the police. Seeing things happen like, you know, the vote of the Minneapolis City Council to defund the police, like different initiatives like that happening all over, that 10 years ago in the movement, people would be like, what? No, that's quote unquote crazy talk. Like, you can't defund anything. And so I think in the middle of that, I just saw a lot of people be like, oh, wow, we might actually win. So we really have to put our money where our mouth is. If we're saying defund the police and we're saying we really mean it, there's this call, you know, to bring our wide variety of experiments in non-state-based ways of creating safety to a broader scale. And I just saw so many millions of conversations online where people are like, I want to learn about TJ 101. And also, okay, real talk, how do you intervene when you're scared to intervene in a physical fight? What are de-escalation skills? There's so much work that Ejeris and Vision Change Win have been at the heart at, in terms of also intervening when there's white supremacists on the streets with guns. And you're like, okay, how do we de-escalate? How do we de-escalate racist violence if we know that not only can we not trust the cops, but they are the cops, right? You know, a lot of the time. So I've just seen a lot of messy and complicated conversations that are also really exciting, where people are like, shit, if we're actually given this opportunity, if it's like, I used to use this phrase with people I worked with, where I was like, okay, if you had a magic wand that worked the way it did in the movies and you could make your dream happen, what would it be? And I kind of feel like we've been in that moment a bit of like, if we were actually given the chance to be like, okay, no more cops, no more police funding, what do you do instead for real? I think that there's been an enormous amount of push for us to level up. And I've seen at times people are struggling. At times I see stuff like Representative Ayanna Pressley, right? And like other people being like, okay, what are different options? I see things like the Breathe Act in the States, right? Which is a piece of legislation that people are trying to get through that would have a lot of TJ elements to it. And I also see the growth in overlapping ways of, for example, you know, so many places, one of the intersections, as we know, of disability and transformative justice is that people call 911 when someone's having a crisis and they're like, I don't know what to do. I'm supposed to call 911. And then we know that so many disabled people, particularly disabled Black, Indigenous people of color, are at high risk of getting killed by the police when that happens, right? So I've seen an incredible growth of projects of people being like, let's do something. Let's have crisis support places and, you know, support hotlines where you can call and we won't call the cops on you, right? We'll listen to you. We'll try and figure out, like, do you need food? Do you need a therapist? Do you need someone to just listen to your trauma? What is it? And that's enormously, as somebody who is a mad person of color who's queer, that gives me a lot of hope, because for a long time, Trans Lifeline, who I want to shout out, they were one of the only places that was really like, yep, if you're trans or non-binary and you're in crisis, you can call here. And unlike every other suicide hotline, we will not call the cops on you without your consent, because we know how dangerous it is. So yeah, I think the gauntlet's been thrown down and we're responding. And I'm also really curious right now. I think what I've seen a lot when it comes to moments of insurrection in the positive way and revolutionary change is there's like, the moments where it just feels like we're all in the streets or at home on the phone, we're all in it. And it's like a wave and it peaks and it crashes. And I think we're in a little bit, I mean, in the States right now, I think people are just like in shock and still responding to crisis every day in terms of white supremacy and police violence. And we're also kind of like, okay, what next? You know, Trump's out, there's a big change. We're not safe yet. What do we do? And yeah, there's a lot that people are navigating, but I'm hoping that we can keep building on the audacity of the projects and the demands that I saw getting built last year. And I want us to keep making more demands and not be like, oh, in the States, oh, Trump's out, so we can relax. And I don't think a lot of people are. But I want us to keep being audacious and to be like, what can we do to build with what already exists? Like, I'll say quickly that in Seattle, there's an Asian Pacific Islander and Cutie BIPOC anti-violence group that's like, we're going to actually give mentorship and support to people who want to learn TJ in their communities. So you don't just have to do it with a zine by yourself with your best friend. And I was like, yeah, thank you, support. Okay, I could go on and on. I'm going to stop now. Sorry if that was too long.
No, it's amazing, and it's so much to this is it. This is a year unlike I mean, never did I ever think I would be reading about abolition in Cosmopolitan. So literally. So there's a lot to say. So thank you for all of that, Leah. Just a quick a suggestion to the panelists and to Leah and Ejeris for now. If you want to move a little bit more to the left of your screen, it just apparently will make it a bit easier for people reading your lips in terms of the positioning of the ASL. So thanks so much for that. My last question for you, just before we turn to the contributors of the book, is as we know, as things get picked up and as things get absorbed into mainstream phenomena, mainstream culture, mainstream practice, things start to shift and change. They can sometimes shift and change. What are our real talk thoughts about the state of transformative justice right now? Are we in a good place? What's happening with TJ right now? I mean, Leah, you've just sort of, and Ejeris both, you've just described the ways that it's being taken up in these beautiful, amazing ways, and how more and more people are having that revolution in their consciousness to imagine another possibility. But what is the impact of this all on TJ?
I can start a bit. I think so we're having this moment that's incredible where so many people are interested in TJ. Like so many people are interested in building their skills and how do they practice it. And I'm on board with abolition and all these pieces. And then it's also like, you can be like, oh, capitalism, right? So there's also this piece where I've started to feel really concerned about like people marketing TJ, people selling TJ. And our intention with the book was not to become, to elevate ourselves in any way, shape, or form. And you can see that in the construction of the book and even in how we build events where we're talking about how do you get involved in TJ and what are the skills that you can build. But there's been a lot of like new TJ consultancies and pay me for my workshop. And so I worry with that we are turning a lot of our liberatory practices. Sometimes like there's an incredible thing that social media can do around spreading information, but there's a piece around the intersection of marketing and branding that also is embedded in some social media culture that that I am very concerned about the TJ market and wanting it to remain a community-based practice on how we survive and stay safe. And not a thing to be constructed, bought, and sold for profit, just in a way that's cute and liberatory, right? Like put a little liberation on your capitalism, right? That doesn't actually work. So all that to say, that's my concern and around how do we, so I see people, I want people to build TJ skills to make their communities safer, but not to like, I don't know, add TJ to your resume. Like that's not the goal. So that's like the kind of place where we're at with our movements, and it's not unique to TJ, right? It's really around how we want to navigate celebrity and celebritizing and how it impacts our work when we're trying to also stay and build community. And I don't have strong answers, and I want to be with all of us in it, right? And yeah, just thinking about that. And Leah, go for it.
Oh my God. Also, I got the YouTube comments that we have to be louder. This isn't usually never a problem for me, but hopefully this will work. I have so much real talk to say. I mean, I think it's just the kind of moment where everyone's like, okay, yeah, TJ, wait, how do you do it? And just briefly, some things that I've seen that people struggle with is I see people saying TJ, and what they mean is a certain kind of circle process, and that's it. And I always get so frustrated by that. I especially get frustrated when I see people go, well, TJ doesn't work. And I'm like, really? You never told someone at the bus stop, hey, leave that woman alone, stop being a fucking dick? Because that's TJ, right? I'm really adamant that TJ does not and cannot just be a certain kind of circle process. It is anything that is harm reduction, that brings more safety and more justice. and it doesn't have to be perfect, and it doesn't mean that you have to be best friends with whoever raped your friend after it's done. You know, I often say, you know, my entry into TJ was that, God, in 1997, I had a relationship in Toronto that got violent. And, you know, this is before TJ was a word, right? We didn't have like a circle. We tried to, it didn't work. He was manipulative. And as far as I know, he's still never had some deep, meaningful transformation of, oh my God, you know, I was violent towards you. But, you know, I had my femme friends of color who walked with me and had my back. I had Syrus ask him to leave a space when he was mad dogging me. And it wasn't perfect. I also lost a lot of community that really didn't understand intimate partner violence at the time. But I kept myself alive. I had a pipe under my bed. I watched my own back, and I had a couple friends who watched my back, and I'm alive now. And it's not, my safety and healing isn't dependent on him changing his mind. And so I just want to throw that out there as one of many examples of there's a million ways of doing this work. And that's what we were trying to do in the book, is being like, it's not just a circle process. It can be creating a safer neighborhood campaign. It can be being like, immigration can't come on this block. You know, it can be the people on this panel who are like, we went out and found our people who were missing when the cops did not give a fuck, right? Like, it's all of that stuff. And I want to segue and say that quickly that some people I see who are new to the work are like, well, yeah, it's just great. You just love each other and it works out. And I'm like, no, you don't need love. You need project management. You need a sense of what you can and cannot do. Not everybody has to do everything. I see some people be like, we need more people to do this work. Why don't they? And I'm like, because people are scared to fuck it up, because they're survivors and they're like, I don't want to be triggered, you know? And so I've been really on my soapbox being like, you can do one thing. You can bring food to the meeting. You can take the notes. Like, you don't have to be the one who does the crisis intervention stuff. And if you've been doing it for 20 years, as a lot of us who, as Ejeris said, were thrown into this work to save our life did, you can take a break and be like, I'm going to mentor people. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to share. You're trying to do some work and you want someone to talk to, great, call me up. We need to, if we want the movement to really grow, we need to not just wag a finger at people and be like, why don't you want to replace the cops, but to really look at what do we do to make this more accessible, and what are all the different roles people can play. Last up, I would say that, you know, I see this really painful ass place on the internet where, you know, oh my God, I keep being like, I'm going to write the essay that clears up cancel culture for everybody. And then I go, no, I'm not going to do that. But I have friends in my life who are like, who have tried to do some TJ work and have been harmed, who are like, it's all bullshit. It's all bullshit. And it never supports survivors. And I'm like, I really hear that you had a process where it didn't. And that's fucking real. And we can't lie about that. At the same time, I'm like, well, there's a million ways of doing TJ, and some people were helped by different forms of it. So let's hold that. And I see some people being like, let's cancel everybody. And then I see some people saying, if there's any consequences, that's the cops. And I'm like, you know, I think the reality is somewhere in the middle. But I also want to just create space where we can actually somehow, I don't know how, be like, wow, there's immense pain on all of the sides of this continuum that has to be looked at about, hey, tried this and it didn't work, right? So therefore, I want to just go beat up people because I think that'll work. Versus, man, I have experience being shunned, so I'm really like, oh no, let's just be loving and like open-ended and things like that. And I think the problem with the cancel culture debates is, one, that's a term that, you know, it's so much used by white men in the States to shut down all of us, right? And number two, everybody using the words can mean something completely different by it, right? So I don't have an answer, but I do want to create space where we talk about consequence doesn't have to mean, you know, being thrown out of the community or being disposed of. Not everything needs a process. Not everything. I want us to really talk about what's harm, what's violence, what's abuse, you know, because people use those words too, and like, we don't really always have clear definitions. I want people to have more support when they're doing TJ work and not just be thrown into something and then be like, oh my God, that person manipulated me and I couldn't name it because I didn't have that background. You know, a million and one things. And I want us to try and be patient with each other and to give each other credit for how hard this work is. And we're literally like trying to lift the world up on our shoulders. You know, this is an immense amount of work, and I want us to be able to give ourselves love and healing as the hard-ass bitches who are doing this work and who are holding a lot of really hard stories. That's it. I'll stop there.
Thank you so much. And I just want to say a huge thank you to Ejeris and Leah for this fireside chat, for the chance to delve a little bit deeper into the how and why of the book and how TJ is manifesting in our current moment. And I think this is a great segue, this idea that there are many different ways of doing TJ. There are many different ways of practicing transformative justice. There are many different ways of responding to conflict, crisis, and harm in our communities that look radically different than just calling 911 or calling the cops or whatever. There are all of these different ways, and the panelists that we're about to hear from have been practicing it. They've been doing the work and helping us to learn new ways, different ways of practicing transformative justice. So I'm going to turn to our panelists, Monica, Elene, Chanelle, and Terri. And what I'm going to ask you is if you could let us know, what are your stories and concrete skills from the transformative justice work that you've been involved in? What have you experienced, and what do you want to share based on your experience doing this work? I'm going to start with Monica Forrester, and I know you've been involved in a lot of things, community missing person searches and other things like that. I'll turn to you. What are some of your stories and concrete skills from the transformative justice work that you've done that you want to share?
Well, thanks, Syrus. Well, being in this community, I think as a trans person and being femme most of my life as a child, I was always dealing with survival, I think, and, going through school, going through my teens, and, so when I came into the community, I was alarmed of the violence that trans people faced. The only community that existed in the late 80s that I knew of were the streets, trans people that were more visible, that were racialized or indigenous or lived on the streets. And as much as it was an empowering moment to be out in the community and being out and being free and being who I was seeing so much hardship and violence among my sisters that I met, and the policing and the violence that we experienced, not only with police, but with the public and within our communities. I credit my sisters that are passed on. They kept me alive. They gave me the skills. They were doing activism within our community to empower us to be the next activist. And at that time, I probably wouldn't even have thought that. I didn't even know what an activist was. I didn't even do that. I was like, what's an activist? But, I was tired of just seeing the same things. And even in 2021, as much as there's so much access and inclusion, there's still survival among our communities, and we're still trying to survive. And it bothers me that we're still there and we're still fighting for the many basic needs that a lot of people take for granted, you know what I mean? And that's holding space and spaces, housing, employment, equity, and so many different areas of our lives. And, and it's still a continuum. And just to see the alarming rates of injustice among racialized, two-spirited, and Black, African, Caribbean trans people. It's just alarming that this is happening. And, as much as things have changed and, there's, for example, policing, we know policing is just a big smokescreen. And as much as they say they're trying and doing this and doing that, they're still throwing us under the bus. They're only taking interest when we're dead. And these are very problematic for a lot of our community members. And for myself, it was in 1997 when that triple murder with the two trans women and indigenous cisgender women that were murdered by Palmer. I thought that was the turnaround of community, the larger queer community, to recognize the lives of two-spirited and trans people. and but also service users. All these things were popping up. There were programs and drop-ins, and but when Laura Wells was found dead, and not even reported from community agencies and the police, it showed me that our lives still didn't matter. It showed me that regardless of all the programs that are here in the city of Toronto, do they really take our lives seriously? Do they really support our lives, support who we are, and want us to live beyond the statistics of our 20s or our early 30s? So it really, it was scary, and I think that's something people will have to really recognize, that more visible trans people are scared to address or challenge police, challenge the system, because of their visibility, because they're out there, they're our target. We are, the work that I do today, I don't work in a queer atmosphere. I work in the front lines, and I deal with all different forms of violence through the work, through the people that I meet, through, what I mean? But, it's just something of a thicker skin that a lot of trans and two-spirited and queer non-binary folks have learned to kind of protect us with. So with the Laura Wells, that was a pivoting moment for me to really, it was a scary moment. It was a pivoting moment. There was so much going on in my mind when I first did that first interview with the media, and when I challenged the police. That really scared me. I knew, I've known in history trans people that speak out through, they're found dead. They're chased out of the city. That scared me, that, would community believe me? Would community be behind me to support me? That was when I launched that search for Laura Wells. I was scared. I was like, is anyone going to show up? Is anyone going to believe in me? As much as, the work that I've done to bring visibility in the places I've, to bring awareness, were people going to believe in me and believe in our community that we need justice? And, I never once thought police were ever going to be there to support us and help us find Laura. That was not the first thing that came to my mind. If we look previously to, incidents with the police, they've always kept us on this, they look at Cassandra Doe. She was murdered, and that could have been prevented if they informed community about this person that killed her that they knew about. So these things are common threads within our community. So when that day of the search, and I seen such an overwhelming response of people that showed up for Laura Wells, that was a game changer for me in so many ways. It gave me confidence. As much as I'm out in the front lines and I look like I'm confident, I sometimes don't have a lot of confidence. So that gave me confidence that people believed in me, but also believed in our community and that we need justice. I have to credit my many colleagues and people that stood behind me and supported me, like Black Lives Matter and, Maggies Toronto and, and so many different other people that really, were part of that process. And it, I just felt, when that happened, it changed my perspective of what I need to do. I think, I'm considered mama in the community. Everyone calls me mama. I stay connected. I'm not out there. I'm not working the streets. I'm not homeless. I still have a bit of privilege, not a lot of privilege. When I step outside my door, I have no privilege. but I still need to stay connected and listen. I'm learning, even though things haven't changed 35 years since I've been out. Yes, like I said, we have more access and more programs, but, we're still seeing the same things, right? So a lot of my skills have come from my sisters or that I've passed on or people that I'm meeting. My community gave me the empowerment to keep going, and I think it is important for me to listen. It's important to me to listen to people's stories and their experiences and how that shapes where I'm driven to what I need to do or what my platform's going to look like when addressing certain injustice things in our community. Trans Pride Toronto was founded out of, you know, the failure of services in our city. I'm sorry. I will honestly say, as much as we have a lot of services for trans and BIPOC, queer, non-binary people, we're not moving where we're supposed to be. You know what I mean? And when someone told me working in a drop-in for trans people that we should be deserving of what we have, and that was not much, of food and a weekly meal, I really thought, wow, are you just there for the financial, for the money, to create more jobs, to create more awareness, but to see trans people sitting in a space for 10, 15 years and haven't moved beyond homelessness or, beyond, just beyond where they were sitting really bothered me. And Trans Pride Toronto's been around since 2004. We were the first contingency in the annual Pride Parade. You know what I mean? Yes, we've been satellite for many years. A lot of my board members are two-spirited or people of color. We do a lot of the work volunteer because we're grateful for community that supported us and have been supporting us. And
thank you, Monica.
Sorry, am I going on?
I'm gonna interrupt you there just so we have time for all the other panelists.
Yeah, no problem. I just want to end it that the work is never done. I'm really pushing. We have a lot of young trailblazers that I'm trying, that I'm working with to make them the next leaders of this movement. And that's it for now. We can ask questions later. But thank you.
Thank you so much, Monica. And you can read more in the book about Monica's story and Monica's experiences. I'm going to turn us to Elene to tell us a little bit again about some of the stories and concrete skills from the transformative justice work that you've been involved in or what you wrote about in the book.
Yeah, so hi everyone. So I'm from Butterfly, which is an Asian and migrant sex worker support network. So I think I'm so lucky that I've been keep learning from the community, and also this is the place with love, also with the power, also full of resistance. So that I think it is very, very important. We need to start from that, because I think all of us know that law and policy and law enforcement is not the tools to protect. It's never that they are really take care of the life of the marginalized people, and they are the tools to oppress, they are the tools to harm. So that's why I think this is really amazing that we're discussing the alternative, because I think it is so sad that in our society we are being trained and programmed that the call 911 or the police is the only solution to get us out from the violence, but it is not true. Many people don't know that it's not true, but this is the myth that make people believe it. So, and then I think this is great that we have the place that we can share the knowledge, experience, and then build the power. And so, and before I talk about the strategies, I want to give some example that how the law is really make people unsafe. So for example, now recently have so many anti-trafficking initiative and movement that they think that will make people protect the traffic victims. So it is so surprised that even the people in the movement in abolitionism and also even people involved in the defund police, they still think anti-trafficking work from the law enforcement is helpful. So for example, one thing is, so for example, there is a lot of repressive work against the massage parlor. So for example, in Toronto, the worker cannot lock the door. So that is illegal for them to lock the door, so that they will being punished. That make the people, actually a simple thing, lock the doors, make themselves safe, but this has become illegal. So, and also the third party, the client, often is the important person network to make sex workers safe, but they are also criminalized. So I think this is very important. We need to start from recognize it, and advocacy to change this harmful policy is important step to stop this kind of violence, because law enforcement and the state is a major violence for racialized migrant and sex workers. So yeah, and then now it's going to talk about how we can do the work. As I said, we really need to start from looking at how powerful we are. We need to look at how useless of the police system. So, and I think it's because many Asian and migrant sex workers, they are creative, they are powerful, they have a lot of resistance, have been doing, but that may not be recognized. So I think, like Monica said, building the community, building the solidarity, and having the platform to share the experience like this is so important, that people don't feel lonely, and they also can recognize the wisdom, and that is so important. And then it's believed that we can make the change. We can make us safe, so that instead of waiting someone to protect us, so we are the people that we can protect ourselves and also our community. And so this is the first step. So we need to believe we can make the change. We really believe that we are creative. We can develop different way, you know, to address the situation the community is facing. So as there are some example, what I have been working with different sex worker in. So one of the thing is many years ago. So there, like even now, right? So there is a lot of people rob and rape the sex worker, particularly those they are new to the industry. So that we find that actually there are few people, they keep like hurting the community member. They are still targeting the people, particularly the new people. And sometimes people feel so frustrated, helpless, and don't know what to do. So one of the program is, before we have the camera on the phone, so we still use the camera. I think the young people don't know what this camera look like, you know. So, and what we do is we build a connection, so that when the sex worker, they saw the person have been robbed other people, they will call those people not working in that area, you know, no matter the friend or the community organizer, so to chase that person and take the picture. So this is so important, that to help other worker that to know about what happened. But the frustration is because we see so many lists sharing who is the guy doing the bad thing, or the people harming, but then the description is very difficult to make other people to recognize. So that is important step to take the picture, so that can share with the community to really look at like how that guy looked like. And the other thing we do is we print this picture to put in the poster. So I think in Canada it's like, oh, the privacy, you know, like that. I don't know the regulation, but I think it's important. We need to find different way to resist, don't care about that. So, and we make the poster in the area of the worker is working, and then let that guy know that he's being watched. So, and I think this is powerful message, that is like, we are defending ourselves, so don't come to our space, and then you're being watched. And that is so important. Not only give the message to perpetrator, but also is the tools to let the new worker know that we are helping each other, supporting each other. So, and so the other piece is, when there is the moment that we cannot take the picture, that how we can share the information, because this is very challenging. Here is a lot of amazing people, but how to describe other people, the person actually is very challenging. Big eyes, high nose, no hair, you know, that is very difficult to describe. And then we do some training on actually how you can recognize someone. So particularly for many perpetrator, they may change the clothes, but it is very often they use the same bed, or the shoes. Many people may not have a lot of different kind of shoes that we have the training to recognize. Many people may not able to name Nike, like Adidas, or like that kind of brand, but we can say that there is free line on the shoes or a tick on the shoes, right? So this is like accessible way to help the community to share the message. And the other thing is how tall is the people, so that other person, so that how they can use different way to give like more accurate measurement. And then we also do the fun game, like that we have someone walk in and then walk out, and then we try different way to learn actually how to describe, and that is very powerful and also fun, right? So that we need to do the resistance work, organizing work with the fun, and then this is also the fun, and also can equip the community member about like what they need. So, and the other important big piece of the experience how the community member have been trying the way to resist is because there's so many, it's difficult to mention, and there is a lot of strategy I cannot share with you here because this is a public space. We need to keep private. So, but
we have time for maybe one more. We have time for maybe one more example, one more quick example.
Yeah. So I think that is already a lot of like example, but I just think is keep building the community, and this book is a good beginning. Please share the book and buy the book, share to your friend, and then we need to build that collective power. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Elene. Thank you so much. We're going to keep going with our panelists. This is so much juicy fodder and so much to think through. Our next panelist is Chanelle. Welcome.
Hey everyone, hi, welcome.
I don't read the question again, but I'm just wondering if you wanted to share what you wrote about in the book and some concrete stories from TJ.
Sure. Well, so my name is Chanelle Gallant, and I have been organizing with people in the sex trade for over 15 years. And I interviewed Monica and Elene in the book because I knew that sex workers have so much brilliance to share about transformative justice, and that I really wanted to see that knowledge honored and shared. So, when it comes to like specific stories about what sex workers do and don't do, a bunch of that is stuff that we don't really share very openly or publicly all the time. And so, there's some stuff that's in the book, and then other stuff is people can learn about by being in community with sex workers. And I want to talk a little bit today about why I think people should want to be in community with sex workers and should want to actually fight with sex workers to implement transformative justice and to tear down policing. First, also just thanks for having me here. Thank you so much, Syrus. Thanks to Ejeris and Leah for editing a kick-ass book, and to Monica and Elene for sharing your brilliance with me. I interviewed them and just like wrote down everything they said like as quickly as I could, because I just thought it was all so amazing, and I was so excited to be able to share it with people. And you've heard them talk about in the book and here on this call too, Monica, they talked about how sex workers can run their own murder investigations and teach each other all kinds of different forms of self-defense, de-escalation. One of the things that I'm really most excited about is the ways that sex workers share information with each other in a way that is really different than people who are not in the sex industry. So in the sex industry, there is it's very important and very common for sex workers to share information about people who have been in any way problematic. And that ranges from someone who's just like a boundary pusher to someone who like gets a little bit too attached, to someone who tries to cheat you out of money, to someone who is threatening, and all the way up, right? And that information is shared really openly. And I find outside of the sex industry, it's a lot more complicated than that. I think that there's a lot more confusion around what's an appropriate way to share it, what's private. And also there's just a lot of confusion about how to define harm. And there's a lot of solidarity with male supremacist power, to be honest. There's a lot of people who consent to and participate in and uphold very male supremacist ideas about blaming survivors. And that's something that is really different among sex workers, and that I would love for other people to be able to learn from sex workers. And, you know, what I wanted to, you know, so for example, sex workers have things called bad date lists, but they also work together and share information formally and informally through organizations, through online message boards. And that's one of the biggest dangers actually of the censorship of sex workers online, is it's one of the primary ways that they share information about the safety of clients. And abusers know that. Abusers know that sex workers swap information and they try to interfere with that. And when they know that that's been interfered with, they'll try to take advantage of it. And that happens with people who have unpaid sexual relationships with men too. That's normal in the straight world too, where there's like creepy ass folks who prey on people who don't know about them. But there's just more acceptance for sharing that information in the sex industry. So I would love to see people take more of that up and figure out how to do it. Figure out how to do it outside of the sex industry in a way that is liberatory, that doesn't reproduce policing, that's safe and that kind of stuff. Okay, but I want to say a couple words about why I think as well that non-sex workers should follow sex workers. And the first is just that you don't actually have to be a sex worker to be affected by the oppression of sex workers. And that actually everyone of every gender is affected by the oppression of sex workers. Because we're all affected by patriarchal whore stigma. It's kind of slut shaming, it's kind of respectability, it's kind of Madonna whore, but imagine it like a global system that tries to control the sexualities of women and femmes and then punishes those who don't fall into line. And it's everywhere. Anytime you've experienced sexual harm and you've thought to yourself, what did I do? Did I, you know, and this includes me, did I drink too much? Was I out too late? Was I in the wrong place? What was I wearing? You're actually assessing, was I acting like too much of a slut? Right? And that's actually us internalizing oppression around blame for the survivor. And it's patriarchal whore stigma, which tells us that if you act good, you'll be protected. And if you act bad, you won't be. And that's a lie, right? That's a lie. They're coming for all of us. And it's dangerous for all of us. The reason it's dangerous for all of us and not just sex workers is because we don't have control over who gets to count as good or bad. The wealthy, the white, the ruling class, they make the rules, and then the cops enforce those rules. They're the ones who say that just being a survivor is morally suspect, right? And this is true for people of all genders. It's true for men, it's true for people, non-binary people. That sexual victimization is seen as a slutty woman's problem, basically. And everyone who doesn't fall in, you know, into that category isn't seen as protected. And then the second thing I want to say about, you know, following the lead of sex workers is that the only way to destroy patriarchal whore stigma is to take the lead of sex workers and fight alongside them. Sex workers, especially poor and racialized sex workers, are on the front line fighting for our right to live in the inherent dignity and respect for all sexualities. Sex workers teach us about the trap and the lie of respectability more than anyone else. Sex workers teach us about how not to consent to our own oppression. I love sex workers who are so clear and grounded in their divinity and their dignity while sucking dick. Right on, siblings. I love you. You are everything. Not everyone loves sex workers as much as I do. Some people see sex workers as the epitome of victimization. That's just what the ones at the top want you to think, though. Thank you. Some snaps, right? The ones at the top want you to think that sex workers are all so different and so sad and victims because they don't want you to join the sex workers' right movement and strengthen the fight for liberation. They want you antagonistic to that movement. They want us divided and fighting each other. Survivors fighting each other, blaming each other. Well, I was better than so-and-so. She was slutty. So they stay in control of who counts and who doesn't. But just by being here and listening to sex work activists like Monica and Elene, you are resisting this division. You are showing your unity with sex workers. So join sex worker movements, donate, give your time, and support the fight, which lifts us all. And I'll finish there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chanelle. That was beautiful. What a powerful message to wrap on. Thank you so much. And our final panelist, I want to ask you the same question. What are your stories and what is your experience from doing TJ work? What did you write about in the book, Terri Monture?
Sego Sewogwego, Terri Monture Yongyaks, Ganyagehage Wagwaho, Oswego Nidawagano. Hello, everyone. My name is Terri Monture. I am a Mohawk Wolf Clan member from Six Nations of the Grand River Territory, where I'm coming from tonight. And I want to talk a little bit about the work that I've been doing with my comrade, Audrey Huntley, who also contributed to the book. We have been doing a lot of work. Probably, I guess people would think of it as being a lot behind the scenes. But our primary, our primary goal at No More Silence is to support the families left behind when an Indigenous woman goes missing and is murdered. So we know that in Canada, in this country, you should actually pronounce it Ganatna, which is the Mohawk pronunciation. We actually say that if we had a town that has the equivalency of as many women per capita missing in Canada based on our population, it would be as if a town of 20,000 women had just disappeared. So we have to be very clear that this is a problem of not only colonization, but it's a problem of capitalism and the theft of land, because a lot of women end up having to move off their territories, away from their families to support themselves. They've got nowhere to go because of domestic violence. A lot of them move to the cities and become marginalized that way because possibly they don't have as many skills. And these sort of material living conditions create the problem where our women go missing, and it's very easy for them to just literally disappear. Because one thing that we know is that the cops don't care. They don't look for our women the way they do for a blonde-haired, blue-eyed white woman. And nor they won't even kind of consider it. Like very many times, and I've heard this refrain over and over again, even in a case that happened on my own reserve, where a woman goes missing and the cops go, "Oh, she's just out partying." It's a common refrain that we hear a lot of the time. So I want to tell you a little story that we just did, it was even like 3 weeks ago, where an elder in Winnipeg had reached out to No More Silence and several Indigenous women in the community in Toronto because he was concerned his granddaughter had sent him a message that she wanted to come home. And so he had sent her money and he was going to go to the Winnipeg airport and pick her up. But when he got there was nobody, of course. And she had not obviously been on the flight or anything. So we had to do this whole thing of like, where was she? Does anyone know where she is? Can we get money to her? What happened to the plane ticket? All of these things. So we ended up relaying messages in a corridor that went from basically Norway House in northern Manitoba, Winnipeg, Thunder Bay, Toronto, to try and figure out where exactly she was. We eventually did find her, and we did realize that she was in such crisis, she literally couldn't get on the plane. So we were able to get her help and get her in a place where she was stable until she could go back home. And we did this without the cops. We didn't even involve them. This was basically a kind of a relay sort of phenomenon using Facebook and some Twitter and people just direct messaging each other around how we were going to find out where this young woman was, who's only 20, and where relay the message back to her family who were along the way. Another thing I want to talk about quickly is on my own territory. We had a terrible thing in 2012 where a young woman who was pregnant went to see the man who had was the father of her baby and said, this is what's happening. I'm going to have this baby. I want to talk to you about support. During that discussion, he killed her and then buried her body on his family's land and then sent a message to her mother saying she had just decided to go and clear her head and move to Toronto, which of course was not the case. And it took about 3 months to discover her body. No one knew where she was. We finally broke open that case. It's been a long series of going back and forth. He got out because there was a technical decision. The judge hadn't talked about provocation. And I still have trouble understanding how a 112-pound young girl who's 5'6" is provoking a 6'2" lacrosse player. But whatever, that was the legal definition. So he gets out of prison after having served, I think, maybe 4 years he initially got a 25-year sentence, but he got his sentence commuted. He wanted to go back to playing lacrosse. Lacrosse is the Haudenosaunee men's game. We believe it is like our medicine game. There's a lot of what I call machismo attached to it. It's how a lot of young men get stature in our community by how good they can play lacrosse. This guy was actually a fairly decent lacrosse player. And when he came out, he tried to get back on a team. Every single team on my reserve and all of the Haudenosaunee communities around, as well as some of the non-native teams, would not have him. And he is no longer allowed to play lacrosse because the word of what happened and how our community dealt with it, and the fact that he was literally banished, even though his family's still here, he's literally been banished from the reserve and from playing lacrosse ever again, because there was an understanding of the kind of justice that this family needed in order for some kind of restitution to be made. In the old days, there would have been major restitution paid, right? Because the idea was that we'd have to get back into balance again when there was this kind of disruption. However, because of the modern society in which we live, us taking those kinds of justice measures into our own hands don't happen anymore. We have different ways of dealing with it. And at Six Nations especially, there's a strong community ethic that really allows us to do these sorts of things without too much trouble. The problem is because Haudenosaunee communities are spread across Ontario, Quebec, and also like Wisconsin, Oklahoma, and New York State, we have a lot of trouble trying to make sure that we make those connections when we're talking about our own. So even though colonization and the political realities of how we have been separated sometimes work against us, our community's trying very hard to get those old clan ties, which meant that if you are a wolf clan, but you go and visit the Seneca territories, the Seneca wolves will take you in as if you were their own. So we're trying to build those sorts of ties back up again so that we all understand who our citizenry is, so that these natural justice and these TJ kinds of things, but that for us, they're actually getting back to old ways, are able to come forward again. And I think that that's the work that Audrey and I at No More Silence, and also Indigenous Land Defense Across Borders, because we did a project where we went to Palestine and found out how the women there are dealing with these similar kinds of injustices, and try and talk about how we defend our land, the last vestiges of our land. So we are really trying to make not only these connections across communities, across an urban Indigenous community, but also across borders. And hopefully, as time goes on, we want to visit Mexico, the Chiapas people. We want to go to some projects that are happening in Sri Lanka, in the Philippines, and also in India. And hopefully we'll be able to do this more effectively once the pandemic is over. So those are sort of some of the things that we've got in the works, and how we're trying to bring forward kind of a forgotten way of dealing with the community, right? Of using ancient old practices in a modern setting. And that's some of the work that we're trying to do peripherally, not only in community, but also as part of No More Silence. So it's been an incredible journey and a lot of fun, but it's also, it's a really interesting way of dealing with things outside of the police, outside of the structures of what we consider Canadian law, and go back to, it's not quite the old way, but it's getting close. And I really like the idea that we are using some of the like some of the stuff that we've picked up from other communities, right? You know, some of the stuff we've learned from our Pacific Islander families and from our Black brothers and sisters, and things of how we can make these things work in a modern time using old and ancient practices to like make sure our people are taken care of. And that's all, you know, like I think that's something we can all think about. So that's
Thank you so much, Terri. Thank you. That is so much to ponder and so much to think through. And I love this idea of the return to old ways. We're not just we need not reinvent the wheel. We need not innovating in the moment. Well, we are, but we're also returning to old ways. So thank you so much. So I'm just very aware of the fact that we've had this beautiful and fruitful conversation, and we want to get to some questions and from the audience and some Q&A. But I want to respect our body minds. I want to make sure that we are caring for each other. Part of transformative justice is making sure that we take care of each other. And so we're going to take a break right now. It's 8:20. We're going to come back at 8:25. So feel free to chill here on the room, chill on the YouTube. Feel free to give your ocular senses a bit of a break if you need to, and we'll be back at 8:25, ready to take your questions. So we'll see you in a minute. Welcome back to our discussion. Let's talk about it, exploring transformative justice in the apocalypse. We've been having a very fruitful conversation and discussion tonight, exploring the ways that we can practice transformative justice every day in our everyday life. We've had panelists describe how they've been doing it in their communities, and we heard from the book Beyond Survival, the co-editors Ejeris, Dixon, and Leah, Lakshmi, Piepzna-Samarasinha on their hot topics and hot thoughts on TJ in the moment. I wanted to, before we go to your questions, which we're just about to do, I wanted to give everyone a chance to just jump in here or just hop in and offer some thoughts on how folks can get involved. So if this conversation has whet your appetite, has left you feeling like you're grasping for more, wanting more, this is an opportunity to hear how to get involved in upcoming local transformative justice events, programming, etc. So this is a chance for you all to shout out what you're working on and how folks can get involved. I'll turn it to Ejeris, Leah, Chanelle, Monica, Terri, and Elene. If anyone has any that they want to add. I have some I can add. Monica, please go ahead.
Okay, so I work at Maggies Toronto. You can check us out on Facebook or our Twitter account or Instagram. And there's so much going on with Maggies to get involved. We're always looking for volunteers, people to be part of our demonstrations. There's that one coming up in March, Sex Workers' Rights Day. Get a hold of Jen at maggiesto.org or myself, Monica at maggiesto.org. For Trans Pride Toronto, you can check us out on the web, www.transpridetoronto.com. We do a Sunday afternoon jam in the park at the 519 with social distancing. It's a time where you can get to know community. We give out hot chocolate. We have music going. We engage with different community members on how best to support community that are most marginalized and dealing with this pandemic right now. So it's just about getting informed. And, if you want to be an ally, really, get to know community.
Amazing.
Go on Maggie's websites, Trans Pride Toronto, get some history of who we are, and then come on board.
Amazing. Anybody else?
I'd like to talk about February 14th, where this year we always do our strawberry ceremony at Toronto Police Headquarters. This year, because we're in a pandemic, we can't do the ceremony the same way. However, what we're going to do is have a live stream. There's going to be a small, very small sort of ceremony with the same prayers where people can follow along. And it will be like the same time, but it's just not going to be a gathering as we used to do. There's going to be a small group of people all masked up, of course, but we're going to do something interesting. So please stay tuned for the No More Silence Strawberry Ceremony on February 14th.
Thank you. And that's normally at noon, right? Great. Thank you so much.
And Elaine, on Facebook as a live stream.
Thank you. And Elene, you wanted to mention being an ally with sex workers, and you've put in the chat here, Chez Stella, the organization Stella. You can check out chezstella.org. And I know Anna, thank you so much, is putting links in the YouTube for everybody to be able to link to these. So thank you so much. We also have, of course, groups like Not Just Another Case, when your loved one has gone missing, as a video link that you can watch, the organizing of the Toronto Prisoners' Rights Project, Black Lives Matter Canada, Butterfly, Migrant Sex Workers Project, and more. There's also the incredible work of Kai-Ching Tom, who has been doing incredible work on Instagram, as well as with her book, I Hope We Choose Love. Kai-Ching Tom is a Toronto panelist who hoped to be here today, and we're giving her a huge shout out and for all of the incredible work.
Yeah, and I also want to add, as I mentioned before, now because of the anti-trafficking movement policy, so the policing is not only the police and law enforcement, but also the social service organization, even doctors, nurse. So that's we have a petition, really want to gather the power and the solidarity to stop the harm of anti-trafficking movement and initiative. So we really need your support. And in many cities, sex work is still criminalized, and also the massage parlor being shut down. So that we really want you guys to support the decriminalization of sex work and full decriminalization of sex work, including client and third party. So I think this is really important, continues to have your support.
I can name a couple quick things.
Yes.
Sure. So Vision Change Win, where I work, we've been really focusing on abolitionist security and safety practices for organizations and communities. We have a toolkit that I think we can post in the chat, and we'll be doing, we're going to be partnering with Project Nia on a workshop around this toolkit in March. There's also going to be another Beyond Survival, like Transformative Justice in the Apocalypse event with our New York presenters, and that will be March 11th at 7 p.m. And we're also going to be doing a community de-escalation series with Project Nia that will be kicking off in February. And you could follow either Vision Change Win or Beyond Survival or me at Ejeris on like Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook, or any of those. So just wanted to name all of that.
Leah, yes, thank you.
Sorry, I was like, how do I unmute? I should know this 5 million Zooms later. I also wanted to shout out some resources on top of the amazing ones that have already been lifted. I mentioned API Chaya, which is a Seattle-based organization. I want to, because there's a lot of people who are on the Zoom who are in Toronto, Southern Ontario, but there's also people, we got the list, and there's people from all over North America, Turtle Island, and the world. So I want to shout out some resources from all over to check out. I really appreciate API Chaya because they have a project where they're like, hey, a lot of people struggle in learning transformative justice skills because we're doing it in isolation. They have a project where they're a traditional, a domestic violence, sexual assault nonprofit, but they're like, we actually are doing skills building, and we're using our money that we get from different, the federal government, or wherever, to match people up with people who are more experienced, to give them mentorship and solidarity and support. And to me, that's a real possibility model for how we actually give people the support to keep building out these skills. I also want to shout out CAT 911, Community Alternatives to 911, which you can find at cat911.org. They're a network of groups in Los Angeles that there's like 20 or 30 different neighborhood-based groups where it's people doing all kinds of work to basically just do what it says, create alternatives to 911, which could be crisis intervention from a non-medical, non-ableist perspective, could be actually dealing with violence, like when people are getting in a fight on your block and you're trying to figure it out, and they're like, hey, we can send people who can de-escalate stuff, domestic violence, all kinds of stuff. Check them out. They have some really great stuff. Last but not least, I want to shout out the disability just, oh man, it's the, I'm fucking up my own group. It's the Disability and Abolition Solidarity group. I will find the link, or if somebody else knows it offhand. They have some great resources that are up, and they're building more work to really build the connections between disability justice and abolition. Because as a couple people mentioned, there's some pushes happening right now where people are saying, oh, we'll just get rid of the cops and we'll get a whole bunch more psychiatrists and that'll be great. And for so many of us who come from communities that have been institutionalized, locked up, forcibly drugged, we're like, actually, that's not the solution. Like, what is the solution is listening to mad and neurodivergent people about what we already know we need, which is non-forced peer support, free therapy, free rent, basic income, stuff like that, but also, real love and respect for us as crazy people, and the support of what we need. So I will stop there.
Thank you so much. And Chanelle, do you want to tell us about this piece that you just wrote?
Yeah, I just dropped a link in the chat, which was at the beginning of my comments, I talked about how sex workers share information in a way that I think non-sex workers could study and learn from. And I wrote an article for Bitch Magazine on that, and I just put a link to it in the chat if folks want to learn more about some of the characteristics that that kind of like safety information sharing as a transformative justice strategy and how sex workers use it.
Thank you all so much. And we can keep these links coming, and hopefully they're all coming to you on the YouTube. And folks who are watching, feel free to comment links that you know of as well. We can do some reciprocal learning here, which is so beautiful. So I want to move us to some of your questions, because you've been taking this in and have some real questions about some of the nitty-gritty. So I'm going to just turn to all of the panelists today and ask a couple of the questions from the audience. The first question, I think, is a really timely one, which is this question of what happens, how do you find a sense of repair after a failed TJ process? So what happens when the transformative justice process doesn't quote unquote work, and there's a lack of trust that is sort of engendered in that? How do you come to some sense of repair? Any one of you. This is an open question to all of you, so anyone can take this one.
I'm very fortunate to come from a tradition. My culture has what we call a condolence ceremony. And it's usually performed after a great loss, like a death. But I also we've been looking at using it practically in terms of when something where you wanted it to work and it doesn't go right, there's a little bit of a grieving process in it. And there's certain things about the condolence rite that, you know, there's a removal of the tears. There's we take away the block in your throat. We let you sleep soundly, because when you're upset, you can't sleep. There's any number of things, but it's like a physical emotional release. And I've been looking at how, because we do it with tobacco and there's certain words said, how those rituals clear it out. It's like kind of it's like a sort of like we usually smudge at the beginning of things. This is a way to close it off. And so we've been talking a lot about, we haven't really done it, but I'm looking at it as a way of, there's got to be something that we do like that marks where you were unsuccessful, right? Like where we can take the lessons from what happened and apply them differently the next time. So I look at kind of sometimes, because there has been failures, and I'm not going to lie, we've had some major ones around not find, you know, in the case of Bella Lubican, who fell from a 30-story apartment building in Toronto 4 years ago, we have never found what happened. No one will talk. So we know that there's certain times where TJ just doesn't work, for whatever reasons. People don't want to participate in the process. You know, maybe they weren't on a way where they wanted to hear these things and participate in the process. So I'm really looking at how do we resolve those issues, and is there a way to move things along even if people won't participate in the full exercise of TJ, right? So those are the things that I'm trying to we're trying to work out as we go through the process.
Thank you so much. Elene.
Yeah, I think that because we are facing the giant institution mechanism, of course, it really make TJ not easy to success, as it is often not successful. But I think this is dangerous. We think that we need to have the solution that fit all issue, right? So I think transformative justice is a process that we keep learning, we keep fighting, we keep transforming, and I think this is the blood of transformative justice. Is not a static thing we can change, and even this is working for some people may not be working for other people, and this is working for this moment may not be working for other moment, and I think that how to find little bit thing we can change, and that is the process. And I think this is very, very important, and not feel discouraged by feeling not be successful, because the system and the institution is designed a way to stop you to do the transformative justice. We are fighting the giant mechanism, just like Chanelle said. Sex workers have been sharing information by internet, but internet being shut down, that we need to find different ways, you know, to be creative and keep like trying different way to support and bring the transformative justice. It's ing form, you know, like for me.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm going to move us on to one more question before we close out. And this question is, the person asks, they're wondering if anybody has any strategies, lessons, rituals, or affirmations that have emerged about this as a direct result of the pandemic, or that have been particularly relevant in this time when we're online, when we're disconnected from our usual access to community. What have you gleaned about doing transformative justice work in these conditions? And it's open to anybody.
Well, even though we're through the pandemic and, we should be staying home and, we're still out there. I'm still out engaging in community because community needs each other. And our community is all over the place. They're very visible right now. We're seeing a lot of our community members not housed and stuff like that. So it's really important to be getting out there and engaging and talking. And like I said, we have our Sunday get together. And this is a time where we can share. I think sharing is important around TJ because it allows us to get storytelling has always been big in our community, and storytelling is it's something we do regularly. We're always talking about things that have happened, how we've overcome those things, how we challenge those things. And I think it's important through the pandemic where a lot of community members don't have the access to social media that for myself, being on the front line is important to being out there to make sure people know that we're still thinking about them and supporting them. So.
Anything else that's come from folks from this land of being online or through the pandemic in relation to this?
Signal is your friend. I spend a lot of time on Signal messaging people and just, I think we have to be also smart because I'm also involved. Right now there's a land defense action at Six Nations. I'm not sure if people know about 1492 Land Back Lane. So I've been talking a lot, because I have friends and relatives and clan members and all kinds of family doing that work there. So we talk a lot on Signal, and a lot of it is around how do we do this stuff without drawing attention, right? Like, how do we do this work and be visible to the community, but not bring the attention of the law down on us, and do things that are innovative and smart and that the community can get behind, but doesn't bring down further censure, right? So we spend a lot of time on Signal, talking about different strategies, how to do things, how to hear from the community itself. I've been learning a lot about how to do stuff that way, how to network in other forms of communicating this way, and just, we've had to be innovative because you go anywhere near the site, you're at risk of being arrested. So we do a lot of different messaging because we just can't be near the site, right? So it's just a matter of using technology where you can best gather your community, I think is the number one thing I've learned during the pandemic.
Thank you so much. And I think we can put the link for 1492 Land Back Lane. I think I've mostly seen it as a hashtag that people can sort of follow on Instagram and on Twitter. You can check that out.
You need help for the legal cost because it's upward of like $300K right now just to the defense fund that we need for these people. So it's important that everybody help us out. Thanks.
Thank you. And Ejeris.
Yeah, I think I want to talk a little bit about but what the pandemic has brought. So there have been tremendous challenges and hardships, but there's been this piece, and this is of course around who has access to the internet, but I've had the chance to engage with so many people across geography and location around TJ. I've had the chance to train so many more people and to be in trainings with so many different people. We had a lot of requests right after the murder of George Floyd, where people were like, we want to keep protesting and we want to figure out how to do that in a way that is within our abolitionist politics. And so we went from engaging with, 10, 20, 30 people to doing trainings and work that engaged with thousands of people. So I think that there have been some real challenges of the pandemic, but also ways that it has allowed me to learn from so many different people and to share tools and connect in a particular way. And I connecting it a little bit to the question about like processes and failure, I almost want us to, I think sometimes our processes fail, but sometimes I want to also think about like, how do we define failure? Right? And like, what is because sometimes we are still building safety. Like maybe there was an individual who was not accountable, who harmed again, but was the survivor in more community, right? Did we build more relationships? Did we learn more? Did we build more skills? Like sometimes the criminal legal system has us think about failure in one very particular way that like erases all the things that we're building. And so I think like it's really hard because we've lost a lot of amazing people. Like I know a lot of amazing community members and organizers we've lost due to the pandemic, but I also know that there are some relationships that just got tighter and we found new ways to take care of each other too.
Can I jump off of that? I just want to say that kind of tying what Terri and Ejeris are both saying, and Monica, everybody really, but I was just like, yeah, I think with the pandemic, there's a place where the grief and the death and the stress and the rubber hitting the road. You know, in disability community, we have the term crip, which we use as a verb, like to disable, where disability comes into something. And early on, people were like, God, the pandemic's cripped the whole world. Like people are having to talk about, you know, everything from hand washing, viruses, immune systems, food delivery, mutual aid in ways that we were doing before, but now everyone's doing it. And some ways I saw that playing out was, you know, I felt like something I've seen over and over again as a disability justice person is how hard it is, for very good reasons, for people to admit, hey, I need this thing. Because for most of us, it's been really scary. Even if we're like, oh yeah, I believe in interdependence, it's really hard for us to ask for the stuff we need the most, right? It's dangerous. And so what happened, you know, this year was that on the one hand, there was people in my community who just got even more real about, hey, I'm in mental health crisis. I'm in an emergency situation. I need you to come and do this thing right now. And we mobilized. And we were able to save people's lives that way and save our own lives. And it wasn't stuff that was particularly public or glamorous or on a hashtag, but it was just like, I'm gonna call my friend who is afraid that they got exposed, and we're gonna call them twice a day. And if they don't pick up, we're gonna go over there, right? And make sure they get to the hospital. And I saw that playing out in a number of different situations that also had to do with, you know, partner abuse and sexual assault. Particularly, we know that partner abuse and family abuse really skyrocketed this year because people were like, I'm trapped at home. I've had to move home. You know, everyone's struggling, like the stress is up. And I've been a part of groups and just informal networks and people who've just been like, even in those situations where people are like, I can't leave the house because of the virus, but things are getting really heated, there were calls like, what's needed? Do you need me to talk to your partner? Do you need to come over here right now? We'll get you money for an Airbnb, we'll clean it out. Like, you can come over to my room. Like, let's figure this out. And I just saw the stakes were higher, so people were willing to throw down higher. And that's really powerful. And yeah, I just, within the stake thing, I just wanna really, I think that we don't have enough space. There's so much pressure when we do TJ work. So many people I know are like, okay, I've got to do this right the first time because the stakes are so high and there's tremendous pressure. Often it's like, you know, I've known so many people who are like, yeah, someone came to me with this huge situation just because they were the one person I knew who maybe knew something about violence. And I was thrown into this whole thing with no backup, no support, no elders, no people to speak to, no peers. And then I fucked up and everyone was like, you fucked it up. And what I've seen there be more discussion about as the discussions of TJ gets bigger is like, you know, mistakes are going to happen. And it doesn't mean that we're failures or we're rape apologists. We're human. And that doesn't mean it's like, oh, you know, anything can happen and that's just fine because we're human. But I really, you know, this might be corny, but I'm thinking of Rihanna, never a failure, always a lesson. She has that tattooed on her thigh. And I'm like, and sometimes the lessons are really hard ones. And we need to make that room to like mourn and heal and cleanse and be like, okay, what do I need? You know, what does everyone involved need? But I don't think they have to let us stop there. We can take that knowledge and be like, okay, we learned something from this. Let's do it. Let's go back and do it a different way. And there's something about the speed and also the slowdown of the pandemic that I've seen some processes be able to take that breath, because everything got slowed down because we were like, oh, we're trying to get a Zoom meeting and it's taking a while, where people could be like, okay, what do we need? What's the boundary I crossed? What's the resource that needs to come in here?
Thank you so much. And Ejeris and Leah, I'm thankful that you were the words that we ended on, to sort of have this idea that, you know, we know that the current carceral system is working exactly as it is intended. It is designed to disappear us. It is not designed to keep our communities safer or more secure. So when we're looking for this alternative, when we look to transformative justice, why are we expecting this sort of miraculous never fail? I think that there's a beautiful way of reframing all of the beautiful things that can come, even from the times when we're like, oh, that could go differently next time. That could go differently next time. And I want to thank you, Terri, for offering this idea of condolence as well as a way. So I just want to say a huge thank you to all of you for tuning in today, and a huge thank you, first of all, to Leah, Lakshmi, Piepzna-Samarasinha, and Ejeris Dixon for co-editing this beautiful book, this essential reading for these times, in this moment when everybody is trying to figure out how we are going to take care of each other, as has been the rallying cry. This is strategies and stories from the Transformative Justice Movement that you can pick up and put into actual practice in your life. So thank you so much for editing this book. Thank you for giving this to us. I want to also thank the incredible panelists who have joined us today, Monica Forrester, Chanelle Gallant, Elene Lam, and Terri Monture. Thank you for sharing your stories in the book. Thank you for sharing your stories with us today about your experiences with transformative justice and everything that we've been able to learn from you today. I want to say a huge thank you to our Access team, to Ayoka and Christopher and Stanley for providing ASL interpretation and for CART services. I would love to say a huge shout out to the McMaster team. Thank you, McMaster, for hosting this talk. Thank you for just immediately jumping in and providing support for us all, to be all 1,500 of us to be able to access this in a variety of different formats and a variety of different languages, so that we can all be on the same page and having this crucial conversation. So thank you to McMaster, thank you to Soda, thank you Stephanie, Dr. Stephanie Springay, thank you Anna, and thank you Grace, and everyone, and Gordon, and everyone behind the scenes who's making the magic happen. You can see the link has been posted for purchasing the book From Another Story. Support your local independent booksellers. It is so important in these moments to make decisions about where you're purchasing things, and it really does matter. Local indie booksellers really need our support in this moment. So shout out and thank you to Another Story for carrying this book and keeping it going. Again, thank you to everyone who's tuned in, and thank you to all of you for being part of this. Leah, Ejeris, Stephanie, are there any last words that we want to say before we wrap for today?
I'll be super quick. Thank you, Syrus. I think you thanked everyone, and I want to make sure to thank you for the incredible facilitation. And I want to thank everyone who's here, because TJ work is impossible without you, right? TJ work is impossible without what we build in community, how we take care of each other, how we take care of the people in our lives. So we all really hope that the book is a tool in your practice, and that to rely on what we've shared and the organizations that we're part of and what we've connected you to. And we're excited to be with you in our movements. And I'll kick it to Leah.
What they said, and also I just want to reiterate that TJ doesn't have to be some weird thing that's out there. It's, as Ejeris said, it's the work that you're already doing to keep yourself and your communities alive. And I just want to really just affirm that for folks, and that you can have questions, you can be unsure, and those are the places to start, because we always know what our communities and our need, including the places where we're like, I'm not sure, I think I fucked up, I'm mad. Like, start there and ask yourself and ask your communities what's needed, and you can build what's needed. I also quickly wanted to shout out that if you're south of the fake border, bookshop.org or Hey Press are great independent places to buy the book. And just, yeah, millions of thanks to Syrus, Terri, Chanelle, Elene, Monica, Stephanie, Grace, Anna, Ayoka, Christopher, Stanley, everybody. This was going to be a little talk, and then it blew up. And I want to say, in terms of how did the pandemic shape this, it's really something that this book came out. We had to cancel our entire tour pretty much last year. We had 3 events, and then COVID hit, and we both were like, we can't go on the road safely. We can't bring people together safely. And then what happened was something we never could have predicted, which is that everybody bought the damn book because they were like, we want to learn about how to do this maybe. And AK made it affordable for $1.99 on ebook, which helped. And here we are a year later, and it's just beginning. And it just says to me that this isn't a moment, it really is a movement that's ongoing. So let's just be in it together. And the technology worked even though Mercury's in retrograde. Okay.
Thank you. Stephanie, did you have any last words?
I just want to say that throughout the evening, while there were multiple conversations happening in the YouTube chat and here in Zoom, I was also receiving a lot of personal messages from SOTA students, and there's a lot around this that's so pedagogical, and I really appreciate that as an educator and as someone working with the school. So thank you.
Thank you all. We are going to sign off for today. We are going to keep each other safe. We are going to take care of each other. We are going to transform our communities. We are going to transform the harm that has happened in our communities, and thus we are going to transform the world. We are going to build a world where we live far beyond survival, where we are thriving and we are living our fullest, most beautiful abolitionist dreams together. So thank you again for joining us today. We will be taking we will be doing some editing with the video, and then hope to be able to have it available for folks who want to watch it again for a variety of different reasons. Many of us need to take the information in twice or 3 times to be able to process it. So we'll work to get that ready for you soon. So stay tuned. Thank you again to everybody who's joined in, and thank you to all of the panelists.